Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking. I'm your host, SHERI Horn Hasan of Karmic Evolution Astrology, and I'm coming to you today on July 1st, 2021 from Contact Talk Radio. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. I am my own guest today, in part because there's so much going on, and I felt like I had so much to say that, of course, I didn't have a guest booked anyway, but rather than run a repeat today, I decided to do the show myself. So hopefully it will prove interesting and enlightening. First, my usual housekeeping stuff. You can find my posts and announcements of the show times and the subject matter on Facebook at my Karmic Evolution for Your Soul Facebook page. And there you can sign up for my newsletter, Conversations About Consciousness. You can just go down on the Facebook page and find the join email list and fill that out. Excuse me. Or you can send me an email at SHERI, SHERI, at karmicevolution.com and ask to be added to the mailing list, which I will happily do. Again, if you've missed any shows or want to re-listen to a specific one, please go to my website at karmicevolution.com, which is also where you can listen to this show live, and click on Radio Show on the upper right-hand corner of the banner. If you scroll down that page, you can access the recordings of all my past shows. And finally, I continue to offer my discounted 1-hour Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading to my listeners for only $99. So if you're interested in gaining greater consciousness about your soul's true mission and purpose in this lifetime, if you'd like to move from chaos to clarity in areas related to relationships or career, finances, or health, if you desire to heal old karmic wounds and co-create your own future happiness and success, and you'd like to awaken to your true potential and highest destiny in this lifetime, that's easy when you take advantage of my special discounted offer, again for listeners, a 1-hour Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for only $99. Simply email me. Again, that's SHERI, SHERI, at karmicevolution.com and book your reading today. At almost half the regular price, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable. Okay, so, sorry, I have a little tickle in my throat today. I don't know what that is, so if you hear me gulping once in a while, I'm just taking a sip of my tea. So today, as I am often wont to do, let me back up to some of last week's aspects before we move into this week's Astro news you can use. And first, the day after Venus in Cancer exact opposed Pluto in Capricorn, June 23rd, and a day before Neptune stationed retrograde on June 25th, the foundation of a Miami beachfront condo building gave way and the building collapsed in the early hours of June 24th. Now, June 24th was also the day of the Capricorn full moon, which occurred about 12 hours later after the building's fall, which I think was about 1:13 a.m. on June 24th, and the Capricorn moon was about 2 p.m., I think it was. a little after 2. I remember saying that it was happening during the show time, which was between 2 and 3. I think it was 2:20, something like that. Anyway, during this lunation, we were asked to release anything that no longer serves us as part of a solid and secure foundation in our lives going forward. And of course, as I explained last week, the Capricorn full moon opposed the Cancer sun and reflected the Cancer sun's light back to it. So it showed us any infantile behavior that doesn't serve us well, because it doesn't really make us more secure as we move forward in our lives. And now the Venus-Pluto opposition, which occurred on the 23rd, late on the 23rd, while far more fleeting in nature, looks like it triggered the loss of family, Venus in Cancer, specific relationships with our family members, through transformation to a foundational structure, Pluto and Capricorn. Now, Neptune is, of course, water, and reports have surfaced of an engineer's report from 2018 that stated that water from the pool had seeped, or from underneath the pool, had seeped into the adjacent parking lot garage foundation, along with other signs of the weakening of the beachfront building structure, which was exposed to rising tides due to climate change, sea air, etc. The porousness of the concrete became compromised. So now, of course, physical bodies, Venus and family members, Cancer, are hidden and obscured, Neptune in the rubble, Pluto. Now, remember, in psychological astrology, it's not for nothing that we call Neptune the planet of illusion, confusion, and delusion, and he's often identified in anything. He's identified in hidden things, but so is Pluto, but they're different. Pluto is what's hidden underneath the ground in the form of our buried treasure, right? In the muck and the mire and the sewage is often nuggets of gold. And that's what we find in the earth when we find gemstones and diamonds and platinum and, oil and things like that. But Neptune is when we can't quite see clearly, right? So we see this building that has been destroyed because it imploded, but we can't find the people who are buried underneath. So today, on July 1st, which is just after Mars in Leo opposed Saturn in Aquarius earlier this morning, we've got the third quarter monthly lunar cycle with the Aries moon squaring the Cancer sun, which is going to happen exact in just a few hours. So this cardinal square can be interpreted in many ways, one of which is that the fight, or the hunt, if you will, the Aries moon, continues to find those missing in the Miami building's rubble as family members stand by anxiously and emotionally waiting for news about their loved ones. Now, also this morning, it was reported that they've halted the rescue effort because they're afraid that the rest of the building might come down. So I'm going to talk in a little bit about reversals of fortune and just refer you back to this because this is one of them, although it's, I'm sure, temporary. Now, Saturn, as we know, represents foundations, particularly of the physical kind. Aquarius, the sign that Saturn is transiting through, is an archetypal sign of the group. So we also have extreme heat, meaning heavy and dry, as Neptune's water's been quietly eroding Saturnian structures, which are made, in this case of the Miami building, of steel and concrete. And what happens? Foundations dissipate, and the structure doesn't hold. In short, the bottom drops out. So since this occurred so close to the Capricorn full moon, I really don't think the universe can get more metaphorically clear about it being time to release and or to repair foundations that no longer serve us by, we want to do that, in other words, before we have to witness something implode, right? So the metaphor is the metaphor is the symbolic implosion of this actual building. And, we know, if we've been paying any attention to politics and the news for the past couple of years, actually, that the words infrastructure repair have circulated through the collective for quite some time now, including through potentially proposed legislation, which is soon to be under consideration, or I should say serious consideration, in the U.S. Congress. Now, also, since Mars always represents heat, as I said, especially when he's in the sun's own fire sign of Leo, and Saturn represents the heaviness of lead and is in Aquarius, the group sign, has anybody noticed that the heat is on, at least for much of the northern hemisphere, which is experiencing much higher temperatures than normal, especially throughout the US and Europe? And this opposition becomes more complicated by the fact that Mars will go on to exact square Uranus and Taurus July 3rd, although this waxing energy has been in play since, I would say at least since the Florida condo implosion has left thus far, at the latest count that I got, 18 residents dead and 145 people still unaccounted for. So again, to recap, we know that Neptune stationed retrograde in its own sign of Pisces on June 25th, which was just after Venus in Cancer opposed Pluto and Leo on June 23rd, and in between on June 24th was when this building suddenly collapsed. So this is where the square to Uranus and Taurus comes in, because Uranus is, of course, sudden, unexpected events or change, or what I referred to before as reversals in fortune, while Taurus, like Saturn and its sign of Capricorn, represent both the body and people, structures, and other items from the physical world. So it's interesting also to note that on the day Neptune stationed retrograde, June 25th, and Mercury in Gemini was again moving forward, having come out of his retrograde on the 22nd or 23rd, he's slowly moving back toward his final square to the planet of illusion, confusion, and delusion, Neptune, and that on that day, U.S. authorities seized a range of Iran's state-linked news website domains of sites that officials say are spreading disinformation, and that I am quoting from the National Public Radio, or NPR, a reputable news site. So, of course, website domains aren't things you can actually see, you know, the World Wide Web and the software and all that. We can't we can't pick it up and touch it and taste it and feel it and all that stuff. Also in the news that day was the announcement that the U.S. House of Representatives voted to restore a rule targeting leaks of methane from oil and gas operations, reinstating Obama-era standards for limiting the potent greenhouse gas that had been dismantled under President Trump. Now, again, Neptune is associated with substances like gases, mostly because they are invisible and therefore hidden to us. I know I've had Mitchell Lewis on this show, who's a financial astrologer, and he likens gas, he calls gas to Pluto, right? Because it's made from the fossilized dinosaur bones and other things found underneath the earth, which is, as I explained before, Pluto's domain. But in general, Neptune is usually associated with gas because it's the kind of thing that you can't see, but it doesn't have to be underneath the earth. It can be in the atmosphere and in the air. You know, if you... I'm sorry to say this, but what's coming into my head is if somebody locks themselves in their garage and closes all the doors and windows of the car and turns it on and decides they want to kill themselves, it's the gas that is going to kill them, right? Or asphyxiate them or choke them or whatever. So we see happening now a review. Remember, Saturn's still retrograde in Aquarius until October 10th. Jupiter, which represents the law, is retrograde till October 17th, although he is going to move back into Aquarius on July 28th when he retrogrades. I mean, he's already retrograde, but he's moving back into his former sign of Aquarius on July 28th, and he'll stay in Aquarius until December 8th when he moves forward into Pisces again. And of course, Pluto's retrograde in Capricorn until October 6th, which is when he'll station direct at the Libra new moon, no less, but more on that when it comes into play. So we may or may not have experienced Mars opposite Saturn by now in our personal lives, but this energy, as I explained, I think at greater length last week, often expresses as frustration or the feeling like we're banging our head against the wall. But this energy is still in play, at least until Mars perfects a square to Uranus, which will exact again on July 3rd. So remember, faster moving planets often act as triggers, meaning their energy dissipates as they move out of an aspect they've formed with another or other planets, but they often set the wheels in motion through events related to their exact aspects. And I would add also that what's interesting here is, excuse me, for those of you who follow astrology and or study astrology and or practice astrology, that the true art of looking at a chart, whether it's a chart of an individual, a chart of a nation, a chart of an event or a circumstance, is synthesis, right? And synthesis is more of a Neptunian exercise, because who's to say that if Mars exact opposed Saturn already and the energy is starting to dissipate, that it's not still in play as he approaches the exact square to Uranus, and that these must be looked at as a unit, right? Because essentially Saturn, the faster moving planet than Uranus, has of course been squaring Uranus all year long and will continue to do so until November. So Mars comes along, the fastest moving planet of the three, and triggers things into happening, right? Or triggers things to move from the energetic metaphysical realm into the concrete physical world. And that's the as above, so below. We look at events that are happening as a result of these waxing energies, which is when they're strongest. And then it's, of course, how we handle those events that are the result of those triggers. So the Saturn square Uranus, because it's a longer term transit, and we've talked about it before, and all the other astrologers are talking about it and writing about it, is saying, okay, we need to decide where our foundation is going to be, right? In Aquarius, where do we stand in groups? Where do we stand with the legislature, right? 11th house is known in mundane astrology as the house of legislature, who, of course, make the laws. And then, where do we need a change in values, right, in order to do that? But Uranus, of course, wants everything to happen quickly, and Saturn resists quickness. So where can we find that happy medium between saying, all right, the universe is already telling us in its own way that we need to repair our infrastructure. We know this. We know this both on a collective level, on a mundane physical level, right? And anyone with potholes anywhere near their their living place, and bridges and tunnels and things that need repair, or money put into things like high-speed rail, because the United States is, at least a couple decades or half a century behind some of the rest of the world in their ability to move quickly from one location to another. Never mind that there have been stories I've seen lately. I used to work as a trade journalist for a maritime publication, and there have been stories lately, never mind about that huge cargo ship that was stuck in the Suez Canal blocking everyone, but how much the large cargo ships, which carry containers full of supplies and imports that we then transport to the stores and points of sale, Walmart and Target and Costco and BJ's and Sam's and all these places where we get our bulk products from, that they're responsible for a large portion of the world's carbon emissions. So is there a more efficient method that these large container ships can use to transfer goods across oceans, which, takes a few days to do. And it's, of course, much cheaper to do it that way than put things on an airplane, which also has its own set of problems in terms of carbon emissions, right? So I'm not an expert on that. I don't claim to be. But what I'm saying is that the world is looking for ways to reduce the pollution that exacerbates climate change, which leads to things like this building collapse in Florida. Okay. Another sip of my tea. Okay, so what I want to say now on a personal level is that regardless of what's happening out in the world, which we can all each of us can try to extrapolate down into our personal universe, between now and July 3rd, it's extremely important, and I've seen this on social media. A lot of the Astrologers, of course, are advising the same thing. It's extremely important not to move too fast, not to be too impetuous, impulsive, or impatient, especially around Mars moving objects, which does include things like, transportation, cars, bicycles, motorbikes, scooters, boats, or, God forbid, weapons such as guns. There are plenty of other weapons, so I'm not going to go into what they might be, but knives if you're working in the kitchen, boiling water, all these things are related to Mars. So sudden moves can result in regrettable consequences right now because of this square to Uranus. So slow and easy does it. Don't rush here in the U.S. to get to your July 4th holiday party or to your weekend residence, and instead take it slow and all eyes on the road if you're driving. Peripheral vision becomes very important here, because you can see something coming if you're alert and aware. I once got into an accident locally just because I was looking down at the radio, moving the dial, or, this was way back. I think it was 2000, I don't know, it was early 2000. So, no, yeah, or even 99, no, early, but it was around 2000. And didn't realize that the car in front of me had stopped. And so, I banged into the car in front of me. So it's that kind of thing. We don't really plan these things, right? So just be extra alert. That's my advice. So meanwhile, let's check out more of what's been going on in the news that reflects back to us these energies in the cosmos. As we watch the period between today, the exact Mars-Saturn opposition, wax toward the exact Mars-Uranus square, all the time, as I said already, knowing that Saturn has been square dancing with Uranus and will continue to do so all this year. Again, I repeat that one of the things I've noticed big time, especially in the news, is reversals in fortune. And among these, we have yesterday, June 30th, shocker that actor-comedian Bill Cosby was released suddenly from prison after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decided he was wrongly tried due to a technicality, or a legal technicality. Now we watch as Mercury waxes into its square with Neptune, which is going to happen on July 6th, so we have a full week almost between now and then, as he's already begun to spin the story and declare his innocence, despite the fact that the court released him not because he's innocent, but because they claim one of the former prosecutors in his case messed up. So again, we have his sudden Uranus release, Mars, from jail, Saturn, under a confusing, detailed technicality around the original prosecutor, providing a promise to Cosby that he didn't need to plead the Fifth Amendment. And I think this has to do with the difference of moving between the criminal and the civil cases he was facing, that the court now says was not upheld. And when I watched the news yesterday, what essentially, I got Virgo rising, so I'll give you some of the details, but this can all be Googled. An original prosecutor in the case put out a press release saying that Cosby would not be charged in the civil case. And the court interpreted, but then later a different prosecutor took over and did charge him, okay? But that was part of the convincing of Cosby to not take the Fifth and to testify, and it was based on his testimony that he was convicted, all right? So that's a short version of it. I'm hoping that's right, but that's what I've heard. And so the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decided that the press release that was put out by the original prosecutor, who then didn't even work on the rest of the case, was a promise. It was a legally binding document. So many in the legal world are shocked because there's your Mercury square Neptune. That's not a legal document, a press release, right? So that's the argument there. So you can see the confusion, the obfuscation, the lack of detail, inherent in synthesizing all of this as energies that are happening relatively close to each other. So again, you can Google more for more information, but the truth remains that the jury convicted him of drugging and raping one particular woman, and that at least 60 other women experienced similar interactions with Cosby, and that a good portion of them testified against him. So interestingly, when you look at Cosby's chart, right now he's having his Uranus return, and that usually happens at 84 years of age. And hold on, I can tell you I can give you his birth data for those who are interested in running his chart, and they actually do have a birth time. Bill Cosby was born July 12th of 1937 at 3 p.m. in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So he's got, hang on one sec. He's got his Uranus return happening at 13 Taurus, because that's where his natal Uranus is. It sits just inside his 7th house of partnership, just above his 9-degree Taurus descendant, and transiting Uranus again is exact conjunct, which means that, you know, the Mars opposite Saturn is squaring it. But transiting Uranus will also be moving this year to trine his 10th house Neptune at 16 Virgo, and next year to trine his Virgo moon in the 11th house at 19 Virgo. So what happened is that the Supreme Court, because of this ruling, says that he cannot be, there can be no, I think it's called double jeopardy, right? You can't try someone for the same crime twice. So he is free, and clearly, unexpectedly for the rest of us, at least on those former charges, forever. Next, we have the announcement on June 30th that Allison Mack, another actress, the former Smallville actress, which I never watched, so I don't know anything about the show, and high-ranking member of the cult-like group, and I'm not sure how they pronounce it, but it's NXIVM, was sentenced to 3 years in prison. She's required to have 3 years of supervised house arrest at her parents' home in Orange County after serving her prison term, and she has to pay a $20,000 fine after pleading guilty in 2019 to various crimes, including extortion and forced labor, when she was a high-ranking member of this group, NXIVM, whatever, the upstate New York group that was led by Keith Raniere, who's now actually serving a 120-year prison sentence. And I believe his is for, among other things, sex trafficking. And this is the cases, these cases revolve around, again, I didn't follow the story in too great detail when it was happening, but branding women, you know, you can't get much more like Saturnian, you know, this is my possession. I mean, Mars, Saturn, you know. I'm going to move to brand you. I mean, hello. And now I'm going to move to incarcerate you. Again, you can Google more, you know, for additional information on this case. Also, yesterday on June 30th, former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, who championed invading Iraq, successfully so, when serving in the George W. Bush administration, along with his protege, Vice President Dick Cheney, died of multiple myeloma. Now, Rumsfeld advocated for the Iraqi invasion based on a big lie, that Saddam Hussein was amassing and harboring weapons of mass destruction, later known as WMD, which turned out to be completely false, but nonetheless provided the basis or the foundation for the reason why the U.S. invaded Iraq in 2003. According to the New York Times, and I'm quoting here, in his 2011 memoir, Known and Unknown, Mr. Rumsfeld, more than 4 years out of office, still expressed no regrets over the decision to invade Iraq, which, I'm going to interrupt my quote to say, let's not forget, led to the legalized language of torture and, you know, the imprisonment of people at Abu Ghraib, the prison down in, I don't know if I said that right, but down in Guantanamo Bay, and enemy combatants and all this stuff, meaning they didn't have any rights under U.S. law. Regardless, I go back to my quote that Mr. Rumsfeld, more than 4 years out of office, still expressed no regrets over the decision to invade Iraq, which had cost the United States $700 billion and 4,400 American lives at that point, insisting that the removal of President Hussein had justified the effort. And there's a quote, ridding the region of Saddam's brutal regime has created a more stable and secure world, Rumsfeld wrote. So clearly, that was 10 years ago when he published that book, but there's some, Neptunian confusion in that and spin in that, right? By the way, it's interesting to note that multiple myeloma, and I have a very good friend who died of it a couple of years back, is cancer of the bone, in which plasma cells, a type of white blood cell in the bone marrow, become cancerous and multiply. And the disease can damage the bones, immune system, kidneys, and red blood cell count. So there's more Mars-Saturn there, attacking of the bones. And his death, while undoubtedly expected at some point, since Rumsfeld was already 88 years old, nevertheless hit the news and affects the collective unexpectedly. I've seen a lot of very harsh language, on Facebook and social media that does not speak kindly of Donald Rumsfeld, and in fact, quite the opposite. And today, on July 1st, just before airtime, we've got the latest Supreme Court decision handed down that represents yet another reversal of fortune. The Supreme Court announced today, again, July 1st, that it upheld voting restrictions in Arizona, signaling that future challenges to such laws will face a hostile reception by the court. Not good news for voting rights advocates, and certainly not what most of us would have expected from the highest court in the land. Again, Google the more. It just broke right while I was putting together my remarks for this show, so I didn't have time to really get into the nitty-gritty. But clearly, the fear is that this case and this decision is a bellwether for the other cases that might come to the Supreme Court down the line of all the other states that have passed restrictive voting laws over the really the past 9 months since the election of November 9/10, whatever it is, election in November, in which Donald Trump claimed that there was it was rigged. And of course, today also, Alan Weisselberg, the CFO of the Trump Organization, surrendered to authorities after an indictment came down late yesterday on June 30th for both him and the Trump Organization as a whole, saying that this indictment would be unsealed later today. So we don't know the specific charges. It's going to be read during this show. Much of this case thus far centers on tax evasion and unfair corporate practices, but it remains to be seen what else will be thrown on the table, especially as Mars waxes into that exact square to Uranus by July 3rd. And there's even more mainstream media news. Hang on, because I want to talk to you about Weisselberg's chart. Alan Weisselberg, his chart, which has no birth time, nonetheless shows us that the Mars T-square is catching his tight natal Saturn-Pluto conjunction at 13 Leo, which Uranus is squaring right now. So it doesn't look particularly good for him, at least right now. Again, for those who are interested, Weisselberg's information, data that I have, which I got off the internet, I didn't really double check it, so I say take it with a grain of salt, is August 15th, 1947 at noon, because I run a noon chart because we have no birth time in Brooklyn, New York. Now, that was the year, clearly, of the, not the last one, because the last one was in late 82 and early 83, but the one before that, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. He was born under it. He has Saturn just past Pluto. So Pluto's at 13 degrees 15 minutes of Leo, and Saturn's at 13 degrees 42 at his birth. He also has that conjunction with the moon at 10, Mercury at 8, almost 8.5 Leo, the moon at 10:39 Leo. Then he's got Pluto at 13:15, Saturn at 13:42, Venus at 16:47, and the sun at 21:58. So what we know is that Uranus is going to go ping, 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 right? Mars is going to move on, and indeed Saturn will move on too. But for the rest of this year, that Saturn-Uranus between the, hang on, let me just run the tri-chart again. So yeah, we don't know the houses. So Saturn is, Mars will move on, but Saturn will continue to oppose, between this year and next year, that stellium of his, and Uranus will be really targeting it at least through the next year to 2 years. So, he's under the gun. I think that's pretty obvious. Now, there's even more mainstream media news. So I suggest we all view what we hear and we read, hear, and see right now, both through this current lens of sudden reversals of fortune, either good or bad, positive or negative, depending on who it's happening to and how they perceive it and how the rest of us perceive it, and the Mercury-Neptune spin of those involved, the spin that they're going to put upon these pieces of news and happenings that occur. For example, the ever-present cries of witch hunt by Donald Trump and his allies will continue, especially since we know this set of Mercury squares to Neptune have triggered his natal Mercury square Neptune, and his ability to sway people with his rhetoric, with his repetitive statements, with his exaggerations, and let's not forget he's a Sagittarius moon, and his impulsive behavior and pronouncements, and of course he's a Gemini sun conjunct Uranus in Gemini. We know Neptune's been squaring his moon and sun, so we'll continue to wait to see if this means he's going to be determined to have completely lost his mind at some point, as in dementia or Alzheimer's, or whether that's true, but people, because of his ability to brand himself as a leader and the person who knows, quote unquote, the truth, which is an irony in and of itself for, for someone who does not ever tell the truth and has documented, God, at this point, it's got to be hundreds of thousands of lies throughout his entire career, but certainly double-digit lies in the 4 years he was president. But whether it's true that he is becoming more and more demented, but that people will continue to believe and follow him in his lies, that in particular, a proven fair and free election was stolen from him. So we can see from Trump's chart, and I'll give you that data if you don't have it, but hang on. I have given it before, but not recently. Donald Trump, and I used the time from his birth certificate, not the time that Marla Maples said that his mother told her, because mother's recollections are often not correct. There are cases where the hospitals are not correct too, but they're usually within, they're usually more accurate than a mother's, especially in the 1940s when everyone was drugged when they were giving birth. So Donald Trump's natal chart is June 14th, 1946 at 10:54 a.m. in Queens, New York. And the point that I was making is he has Mercury at 11th house Mercury at 8:51, so almost 9 degrees of Cancer, square his Neptune, second house Neptune at 5 degrees 50 minutes of Libra. All right. So what I was going to say is that what's interesting now with this Mars-Saturn-Uranus transit, and particularly Saturn-Uranus, is that Mars is transiting through his 12th house, and it's triggered his Pluto at 10 degrees Leo there, while Saturn's sitting on his 6th house Aquarius sixth house Ceres at 12 Aquarius. And Uranus has been squaring that Pluto Ceres opposition from the 12th to the 6th for a while now. Okay, so Mars transiting the 12th is often a time when our hidden enemies come out of the woodwork. But if we're of a more spiritual inclination, we recognize that we are always our own worst enemy, and that we project that fact out onto others and make them the visible enemy, right? So this is a time when people will come after him for sure. Now, Mars moves pretty fast, and Mars goes through a whole entire, 360 degrees of anyone's chart in 2.2 years. So it's not like he's never had Mars go through the 12th before, or had Mars trigger this Pluto Ceres opposition. Ceres, of course, is known as a minor moon kind of figure. Ceres, Demeter, she's a dwarf planet now, but it has to do with what I call sustenance, because Ceres was the goddess of the grain. Okay, and she's the one whose daughter is Persephone, who was raped and kidnapped and brought underground by Pluto, only to be released after long-term negotiations between the gods, because Ceres had stopped allowing crops to grow. And therefore, the gods knew that humans wouldn't be around. They would die out and not be there to build temples and pay sacrifice and homage to them. So the Pluto opposite Ceres in his chart is an indication that there's something missing in his ability to, to self-nurture in a sense, or to grow things, that have lasting value, because Pluto is an annihilator, right? So the budding instinct to fertilize something and to allow it to grow by tending to it. The other way that I look at Ceres, because Demetra George points out in her Asteroid Goddess book, is very related to food. We know that he's terrible with food, that he eats a lot of junk, right? She's often prominent in eating disorders in an individual's chart. I won't go so far as to say that he has an eating disorder, because there's no proof of that I've heard, but he does actually not take care of his diet, and Ceres in the 6th house of health, right? So there is an implication here that, aside from all the other stuff that's going on, that there's a potential for a health issue, especially since Neptune's squaring the moon and the sun at 21 Sag and 22 Gemini, right? So, I don't know. I guess what comes into my mind is he could go whack-a-doodle and just start ordering like Snickers bars for lunch every day or something like that, which isn't going to help prevent Alzheimer's and could in fact hasten it. But in any case, I digress. So Trump is and has been, and especially lately, his own worst enemy, as many people in the media have frequently pointed out. Like Rudy Giuliani, he just keeps talking, right, instead of shutting up and, being quiet. So the question is, and I want to point out here, something I've mentioned before, but not recently, which is that if Trump has a 29 Leo ascendant, as he does according to his birth chart data, that he is, in fact, got the fixed star Regulus on his ascendant. And Regulus is known as an energy that allows one potentially to rise to great heights of fame and fortune. But if you use your power, If you use your power negatively for personal gain, and most of you on the show, I'm sure, acknowledge that Trump is a narcissist, if not many other things, then you will take a fall from grace at some point. And it's just a very interesting thing to me, because I've been waiting. I've noted in his chart that he's come to points where it looks like he was going to take that great fall. All right, the last time that Saturn opposed his Saturn and Venus, which are at 23 and 25 Cancer, respectively, in his 11th house, was circa 1990 when he was forced to declare bankruptcy over his failed Atlantic City, New Jersey casinos. But what we know is he found a way again since then to brand himself, which is very much a potential outcome of a Mercury square Neptune, right? Don't let anybody tell you that Mercury square Neptune just means you're crazy, because it means that you don't communicate perhaps directly or in a detailed fashion, but it is an excellent energy, even the square, for branding yourself. Now, if you brand yourself as something good, it's an image. Let's just put it that way. So an image may or may not actually reflect the reality of the person. In Trump's case, I think it's very clear that it does not reflect who the true Donald Trump actually is. And so since 1990, clearly he went on to become a reality TV show star, and much of his reputation there is what led him to be able to be voted into office as the President of the United States, one of the most powerful positions in the entire world. So the question now is, because Pluto squared his 23 Saturn already, but is now coming back in its retrograde to re-square his Venus in Cancer in the 11th house, while this T-square is happening, that's triggering his Pluto opposite series, whether the gig is finally up, okay? Because in these indictments that they're going to, or as we speak, they are unfolding in New York City at the Southern District of New York's DA's office, they are not charging him. But what they are trying to do is indict his company, because it's a well-known fact that once a company is indicted, no bank will lend to it. And, there's a lot of obfuscation and confusion, and all of this business about his taxes and tax returns has been around whether or not he has defrauded the government. And again, you could Google, and there's a million people talking about it yesterday, the day before, last week, today, tomorrow, whatever. If you want a peaceful July 4th holiday, you can tune it all out, but you'll miss the details that come out. So, although they'll be writing about them forever, right? So is Regulus on his ascendant finally going to show us that the reversal of fortune, which is in the short term, he's already had reversals of fortune in the past, are going to be permanent now, or whether they're going to fade away and he will live to see another day, just as he has done in the past. Okay, so let's move on. So I want to say that the Cancer Sun will also quincunx Saturn on July 3rd, which will add more aggravation or annoyance to top off any feelings of frustration, and especially because the Cancer Sun will go on to square Chiron on July 4th. I'm thinking again about this building in Florida. I know it's not the only one, and this isn't the only time, but it's just in the news so prominently now. And we all pray that these souls will be found alive and unharmed in the end. But we're asked to push through. So the quincunx is clearly an annoyance, right? That as we're still going towards the Mars square Uranus, triggering the Saturn square Uranus, that we're frustrated, right? We can't make progress. They just halted progress, like I said at the beginning of the rescue effort. I'm sure it will resume, as I said before, too, but whether that's later today, tomorrow, next week, I don't know. But the chances are getting slimmer and slimmer. So when the Sun squares Chiron on July 4th, we many of us here in the States will celebrate the holiday, but we will do so, A, knowing that we have, potentially more deaths that are going to hit the news, and B, experiencing the surfacing of wounds because we've lost loved ones, particularly over the last year and a half to COVID. And so that we're celebrating a holiday without those people. So again, we might say a prayer for the souls that are still missing, the bodies, the actual physical people that are still missing, that we find them and we find them alive, but also for everyone in their grief, both the families looking for and hoping that their loved ones are still alive, and for all of us who have lost loved ones, whether it was during the COVID pandemic or any time in our lives. Now, when the sun sextiles Uranus on July 5th, we do have the opportunity for creative change, or for making creative change to the elements of our lives that have become too orderly, or too limited. So it's time to reform some of these now as aha moments or revelations sparked by curiosity and imagination stimulate a sudden desire to express our individuality now. Again, this is a fleeting aspect, so, we take it slow. July 6th, third and final square of Mercury and Gemini to Neptune and Pisces urges us to remain in touch with reality and the real world, since we've all seen and heard the kinds of previously hidden Neptune information, Mercury, particularly in Gemini, that surfaced during the messenger god's retrograde period from May 29th through June 22nd, and during this period between the squares of Mercury to Neptune, which exacted first on May 22nd, second on June 5th, and now as we approach this third square, July 6th, that we may be primed to stay tuned for more secrets to be revealed. The good news is that those of us who've been in a bit of a mental fog, and I can testify to that big time, can get ready to finally move out of our Neptunian haze and confusion as this square completes. Also, given that Mercury's direct and that he leaves his shadow period July 8th, or as soon as he passes 24 degrees of Gemini, the degree at which he originally stationed retrograde, we may all find a lifting of the fog. And all I can say is hallelujah, I can't wait to get my brain back. If, however, we've gone to that higher place through meditative endeavors during this period, it's possible we've transcended the more mundane left brain confusion and listened to our inner voice or those of spirit to guide us through this period on a more intuitive level. That's because all manner of metaphysical and creative explorations and expressions can take us to that higher place where we soar above what Stephen Forrest always refers to as the monkey mind and find ourselves on the mountaintop where we're more readily available and able to receive. Finally, we've got Venus in Leo opposing Saturn in Aquarius July 6th, as well as, again, the Mercury-Neptune square, making this a time to get very clear as we begin to emerge from whatever chaotic mental state we've been in all this time about where our commitments lie and to whom. Try not to resent others if loneliness descends, as Venus again moves quickly, making this a fleeting transit. However, we may feel isolated, left out, or lonely now. Remember, this too shall pass, and simply try to ride it out, while also looking at relationships in a quid pro quo fashion, meaning it's not all about what one person in the relationship does for us or we do for them. It's about upholding the commitment from both partners or sides of the equation. It's an uneven seesaw if I do for you, but you don't do for me, or vice versa. I'm also a little bit afraid that by this time, rescuers will undoubtedly continue to search for any missing bodies in Florida, but that it will be understood they are looking for bodies but not survivors, because at this point it will be 13 days since the building came down. So as we approach again, the final square of Mercury and Gemini to newly retrograde Neptune in Pisces on July 6th, I wanted to mention also one other piece in the news that I forgot to mention before, which is the election for the New York City mayor. And that race was thrown into chaos. So it's possible that by then, or as we proceed past July 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, we're going to get an ultimate result. Apparently, they recounted 135,000 ballots twice, or counted them twice, so they had to throw them out, but they still have, and this has been going on since essentially, I think, June 25th, and this is for the primary, okay, for the mayoral election, which will take place in November of this year, that they also discovered 125,000, not discovered, but they still had 125,000 absentee ballots that needed to be counted. In any case, there was a front runner, and I'm not in New York anymore, so I apologize because I haven't kept track of all their names because there were a whole bunch of candidates. But it's the gentleman who was a former police officer, and what else? He had two things going for him. He was saying he was law and order, so he understood the police from the inside out. Anyway, forgive me because we're coming to the end of the show, and this can be Googled. But there are two women who had been coming in a distant second. Maya Wiley, who was a former prosecutor for the SDNY, and Kathleen Garcia, who was also, I think, in the New York City administration in some form or another. Again, check my facts because I'm not saying that I know this 100%. But that Garcia and Wiley look to be tightening their not their leads, but tightening the margin between them and the guy who's in, I want to keep calling him Garcia, but that's not his name. Anyway, I'm sorry. Adams, is it Eric Adams, I think? Anyway, he's in the lead, and they're gaining on him. So let's wait to see what happens as we get to the end of all this energy. And I want to thank everyone for joining me today. I hope you found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Please be sure to join me next week, July 8th, for another episode of Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking. Until then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars.